I've written that story out, so I've thought about it. I've sat with the meaning of it. I've kind of worked through what that meant for me. So when you ask me that, I can rattle that off. But had you asked me that and I hadn't really journaled or, kind of thought about what that means, my life is about storytelling. I research it, I teach it, you've heard the story, I've loved it since I was a kid. I can rattle those stories off because I've, in some ways, prepped them or thought about them for so long.
Welcome to the Storycraft podcast for professional storytellers. I'm your host, Kyle Adams, and I'm here to help you explore how stories shape our connections. Wondering how stories help you network and advance? Looking to bridge online and face-to-face worlds? Foster understanding and ignite innovation? Look no further. Whether you're a leader, communicator, educator, or just love a good story, join us for actionable insights, all aimed at helping you build stronger, better connections. We're glad you're here. But right now, I'm just going to intro you. I feel like this is like an episode of Between Two Ferns.
We can actually just run it right now.
Yeah. If you've ever seen Between Two Ferns, it's really funny.
It's so awkward.
Yeah.
We should get a fern.
That would go really well.
We
Right
should just put it like right here. But this is not that type. This is a serious.
I'm a really good interviewer, I promise.
We're having a conversation. Just start it.
Yeah, okay.
We'll edit it.
It's easy to start interviews with like people that you don't talk to on a daily basis.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it weird?
Now it's like, okay, now we have to have like a set beginning to our conversation.
Yeah, why don't you do that,
This
Kyle?
is it. Would you say and spell your name for us and your title, please?
My first name is spelled Megan, M-E-G-A-N. My last name is the same as yours, so I feel like you should know how to.
You missed an important doctor.
Oh yeah, I'm
Dr.
so sorry.
Megan
I guess PhD would be at the end. Mm-hmm. I don't like to say doctor because I can't save you if you're sick. Don't come to me.
Yeah.
Your life cannot be in my hands.
So you are a doctor of storytelling.
No.
Is that fair to say?
No, it's not. I have a PhD. Actually, you know what though? Now that I think about it, because my PhD is in rhetoric.
Yeah.
And writing. So basically these are fundamental.
For those who may not know, rhetoric isn't like subversive and like manipulative.
No, rhetoric is the art of persuasion. That's
which
what Aristotle
also
said.
Doesn't people hear the word persuasion and that doesn't mean it has to be negative either.
No, it's just the art.
Yeah.
It's really, storytelling is a big piece of that. And if you go back to the ancient Greece,
people are persuading.
That's what they were
and that's
talking
how they did
about.
It was all oral.
It was a totally oral society. And
if
I just found a quote the other day, Kyle, because I'm preparing for a keynote.
Mm-hmm.
Plato said, "Those who storytell rule society."
I mean, isn't that the truth? I mean, it's very true. I mean, like
still today, we have come full circle in that. Oh, let's start there. Okay, so this is
we've already started.
I know, but let's start with this topic.
The rest of
the ancients.
Dr. Adams.
The ancients, when they were here thousands of years ago, which we have their stories, like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. We've probably all heard these names at some point in our lives. Mm-hmm. It was an oral society, so there were no books. We remember their stories because they were written down, but that was a new technology. Yep. Writing was a technology.
And it was going to erase our memories.
Exactly. You have a master's of rhetoric and writing. You know these things. But what's interesting to me is like, once you had the printing press, for instance, then all of a sudden people had access. They could read like the Bible for themselves. Yep. That was a big text, right? Mm-hmm. We had Martin Luther. So it really changed culture. And then we went through the days where we went through all these technological shifts, right? So we had newspapers, we had radio, and then we had television. But in each of those stages, we had stories curated for us. Mm-hmm. So the editors of a newspaper and the journalist, they would go through the day's news and decide, which was most important, what goes on the front page, what goes on this page, what gets backlogged for the weekend. But that was people's main source of information of what was going on in the world, right?
Yeah.
Well, now, since the internet, I think sometimes I just feel like we need to stop for a second and realize we have access to infinite information, and everybody who has internet access, not everybody, but people who do have access to their own platform. So we've essentially come full circle, and so I think when we're talking about storytelling, sort of talking at it from that place is an important place to be because it is so important. It's more important for the individual person the everyday storyteller, the marketers, the storytelling professionals, the business owners, the thought leaders. People are thought leaders now that would have never had an opportunity to have a platform because they were paying for those platforms.
That's an interesting, it's a point of contention sometimes between people. Like, should everyone have a platform?
Yeah, and I think, does everyone have a story?
You tell me. Do you think,
Do you think everyone should have a platform? I lean towards, I don't think that's I think it's a moot argument because everybody does. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, unless you live in, like...
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I guess. But
right. You're right. I did qualify that.
Yeah.
It depends on what access you have.
Right.
But, and that's how it was back then. If you could speak well, that's why Plato said that. That's why he said those who tell stories rule society, because if you could speak well and you could tell your story, you could tell stories well, you could connect with people, you had power. And that's how it is today. And I just want to take a second to just acknowledge that is a very new development. For a very long span of human history, we were in between.
Yeah, when you have, I don't know if we're getting off course now, but when you have, like, let's just say let's just make it easy to understand. In the 50s and 60s and 70s, before the internet, right?
Yeah.
Your story came from maybe, let's just say 50 people. Now your story comes from maybe 5 million people. You could get the same version of that story from...
Yeah.
So you have a lot more information.
Oh, you're talking about, yeah. Oh, I see what you're
sift through,
saying.
as you mentioned,
right.
But, like, it's also, we have more access to information now than we ever have at any point in human history. You know what I mean? Like... Right.
Oh, that's true, because that's building on the Greeks. Like, they didn't have, or the ancients, they didn't have the access to all the information.
Right, yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. Sure.
So... I don't know. I just think it's
I think we need to take a moment to realize the context that we are in when it comes to storytelling.
And the power that people do have to tell a story.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it. So Kyle knows I'm like an eternal optimist. Like, it's just the way that I see the world. But I see it as like, wow, how cool is it that we have people out there that are bringing things to light, there are these communities of people across the globe finding each other, supporting each other, sharing stories that, like, wouldn't be in their local context.
Right.
Any other way. and it helps you feel like, the whole goal of storytelling too is, like, people are feeling less alone too in those communities. Right.
That's a good, okay, so we can kind of shift gears a little bit here, because we always kind of talk about, like, your origin story, like what was your...
Oh yeah, we always start there, that's true.
Well, yeah, we aren't going to start there now, but, sure. Why, and I know these stories, you've told me them, but they're interesting, and I think people would find them interesting, so...
Thanks, guys.
You've always liked story. I know that about you. Tell people.
Yeah, I have to say, I just need to toot my own horn, because when I was in 3rd grade, I had the story, so you're laughing. No, seriously, like, I could take this serious or funny, but, like, when I was in 3rd grade, my teacher tasked us to write a story. And
that's the prompt?
No, the prompt was tell a story, literally.
Okay.
And we're going to put it in a book. Like, and to me, it was like a book with, like, a real cover. It wasn't like the staple pages that my mom put together. It wasn't the little dinky, we're going to staple it. No, it was a bound book. And we were going to practice this, and we were going to illustrate it, and we were going to use our handwriting to write the story. 3rd grade. Unlike my peers, I took this assignment to, like, next level, Kyle.
Okay.
Like, little Meg was like, little Meg was so, like, my story is going to be the best story ever.
Whatever that means. Yeah.
Little Meg knew what that meant.
Yeah.
It's gonna have flair. It's gonna have imagination. They went to I created a whole magical world in my story. No murder. In Megan's happy, optimistic world, there is no murder. You know this, Kyle. Butterflies and rainbows always. And I can tell you the story. I have it.
It's the castle that led to nowhere.
The castle that came from nowhere.
Or the castle that came from nowhere. I've read it. It's a good book.
It is a good book.
Yeah, it's got good
It was
reviews.
inspired. It was inspired by Disney. It was inspired by the Polar Express. Like, all these books that I had looked up to. But here's the kicker. I wrote in the back of the book, we had to do a bio.
Okay.
And we stuck our little picture in there. and you had the main purpose of the bio was like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And I wrote in the back of the bio, I think I said I wanted to be a writer, and I think I said tennis player, like, because that's what I was into at the time. But I said, I want to be a writer.
Oh, that's...
And so it's so interesting to me because, I've sort of chased that my entire life. But yeah, I think I always knew, even when I was little, that I just loved reading. I think that was my first, books were my first friends. The characters in the books were my friends, and they comforted me. And I was an awkward kid. I was really shy. I didn't have many friends. And so books were my friends.
I'm sorry, Meg.
I know, it's kind of sad. I'm like happy about my adulthood, obviously.
I'm not laughing at you.
But there's a shy kid. Like,
yeah,
I was this shy, kind of weird, a little awkward, and I was super tiny, and I remember getting made fun of all the time, and I was the last kid picked in gym class. I hate, like, that's just who I was. But so I think that's where my love for storytelling came, and I think that's what carried me forward in my career, was like, I could connect to these characters, and I saw myself in them. They were like my friends.
So you obviously made it a career.
I did. I was like a lot of journalists that we talked to, or especially television journalists. I think in 7th grade, we took one of those career quizzes, and I got actress, which I laughed because I was like, oh my God, you've seen me try to deliver lines. I got actress, and then I got TV personality, or TV anchor, or some whatever, reporter, and then I got author. So I was like, oh. And then I was like, well, like, a TV person really blends like my love for writing and storytelling with, my love to be, at that point in my life too, I kind of liked being in front of people. I liked performing. I didn't I probably would have liked theater, but I wasn't into theater at the time.
Yeah.
Probably would have liked it. But so I thought that was really interesting. That was the first time I was like, oh, that might be something cool to do. And then I was really lucky because my high school, we had a television studio. And so we had a former, I think she worked at Youngstown State University, which was near my high school. She had worked in like college TV production. She was our teacher, and we had a whole studio. And I didn't make the cheerleading squad my sophomore year. I know. At that point in my life, it was very detrimental. And it was really sad to me. It was a huge deal.
Sometimes I'll hear you, and then you'll be like dreaming, and you're just cussing out the cheer team.
Be aggressive. Be aggressive. That's what I cheer myself.
Flashbacks again.
I am. Yeah, I know. I didn't make the cheer squad, and I thought my life was over. Yeah. As teenagers do, but I discovered in the back hallway the television studio, and I was like, and that was my thing. That was my thing all through high school. I delivered the morning announcements with flair. One time we wrapped an entire newscast.
Kudos to you, because
I wish I could find that tape, because it would be hilarious.
Yeah.
So I did that all through high school, and I loved it. I really did. That was like my thing. Yeah. And then when I went to college, I went to Ohio State, and I knew from day one, as soon as I got accepted, I looked up Buckeye TV, and I was like, okay, there's my extra, that's what I'm doing.
That's what you're going to do.
And I had internships, and
you met me there.
Met you. Yeah. Like, it just, that was, I knew though. I knew. Yeah. But it comes from, like, that came from that blend of speaking. Yeah. Like, I really like performing in front of people, and that's sort of what anchors do. And I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories. I get a big kick out of hearing people's stories and hearing them be proud and excited, and not being afraid to tell their story. That, to me, that motivates me a lot.
So kind of going back to what you said, I don't know if I'm not trying to make just a smart point here, Meg. I don't know. I wouldn't call it, maybe not. I'm being kind of sarcastic here. But you talk about the book when you were telling your story, right? Like, we tell our stories all the time.
The castle that came from nowhere.
Yeah. Going back to that, we have all these options to tell our stories now. Like,
oh yeah,
we could just click a button and you could.
3rd grade, Meg did not have those options.
Right, but Was there some, what was it about, like, what was it about the fact that it was a book that made you so, like, because, like, I feel like when we, put cameras in front of people and we ask them to tell their story, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like, oh, this is serious.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, I mean, that was it.
As opposed to just hopping on a Facebook or live or something like that.
That's such a good point, because I had written, so like even when I was a little kid, you've seen, my mom kept them. I have like notebooks of like stories. I mean, I like am kind of
that was
cringy.
easy for you.
Right. That was my way of releasing emotions. And but even as a young kid who was shy and, like I said, didn't have many friends, that was my outlet. I would make stories up and write them down. Right. And so in notebooks all the time, nobody ever read them. And I knew this, I think, a combination of, for some reason, it was like that official bound book that made me be like, and this is kind of bad, now I'm thinking about this. I felt a lot of pressure to make it shiny and do my best and put on, but it was in a good way. It was like, oh, this is I get a chance. Like, my whole class is going to read my story. And then the part of that story that I didn't tell you, which I think is another important part of identifying as a storyteller, was my parents and my family made the biggest deal about this book.
That's always good.
Anybody who came in the door, you have to see what little Maggie wrote.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a minute.
I am this.
Yeah. And for a little kid who didn't have any friends and didn't play sports, it was a big deal for me to have something to feel proud of. Love what you're hearing on this podcast? Consider booking me to speak at your next event. Dive further into the transformative power of storytelling with my keynote. Tell better stories, speak up, stand out, and build community. In a world that often amplifies our differences, my talk invites you to embrace genuine connections. Break free from the echo chambers and discover the art of storytelling. Learn how to share your own narrative, listen actively, and foster communities that flourish on shared experiences. Check out the show notes to learn more about how to book a talk for your next event.
So when other people feel that same anxiety or pressure to tell a story, you know what I mean? Because
especially if it's like you had said, on camera or on stage, I do believe, this is just my own personal opinion, I think you should put your best foot forward. I think that in some cases, it's okay to wing it. Like if you're on a Zoom and it's a Q&A.
Okay, but wait, when you say your best foot, what do you mean by that? Because like when you say that, I hear like you got to get all dressed up.
No, I mean like you need to be yourself.
Right.
You need to
like I was like, Meg, should I wear shorts today? And you're like, yeah, go ahead and wear shorts. I'm like, I don't know if I should wear shorts.
Are you talking about on camera or just like
yeah, like when you say put your like these are the things that hang you up to not telling your story, and it's a lot of things.
I get what you're saying. Here's my advice. You need to do whatever you need to do to feel comfortable.
Perfect. Okay, yeah.
Because I think that everybody's different. For me, personally, I feel comfortable telling a story when I've thought, that story that I just told you, like I wrote that down. I'm writing a book. Someday I'll finish it. I'll see an official book in the bookstore next to the castle that came from nowhere on our bed. But I've written that story out, so I've thought about it. I've sat with the meaning of it. I've kind of worked through what that meant for me. So when you ask me that, I can rattle that off. But had you asked me that and I hadn't really journaled or, kind of thought about what that means, my life is about storytelling. I've researched it, I teach it, you've heard the story, I've loved it since I was a kid. I can rattle those stories off because I've, in some ways, prepped them or thought about them for so long. So for me, that journaling, like figuring out, here's another way to think about it. As a storyteller, and this is why I love social media too, like stories are just simply, obviously there's the made up stories, but they're experiences that we have in life. They're like all these moments that we have in life where like things are happening and we like a light bulb goes off, or we learn something, or we become like bigger than ourselves. We feel, like, I always tell people like the goosebumps moment, like these happen all the time. Every single day. And some people are really self-aware of that, and some people aren't. But for me, when you write that down, I've been journaling all my life too, Kyle. When you write that down, it sort of, for me, I can rattle those off. So when somebody asks me a question, or when I'm preparing for a keynote, or I'm in class with students, I can think back to my experiences and say, oh, let me tell you a story about that. So especially in teaching, I'll teach a concept to students, and because we own a business, I can say, okay, here's the concept you just read about. Let me tell you a story about what that looks like. And then they remember it, because they remember the stories. They're not going to remember what they read.
Well, okay, so you mentioned our business, and why is storytelling? Why is storytelling? You hear that word,
and
and
that's actually really annoying.
I was gonna say as a researcher, as someone who like literally does like. I'm a storyteller too, but I'm not like a storyteller like you are, right?
Everybody's a storyteller.
Right, but I don't have the credentials, I guess. But
it doesn't matter.
For someone who has like the credentials that you do.
Well, I've spent a lot of time thinking and reading.
What goes through your mind when you see what clearly isn't storytelling be called storytelling, right? Like.
Yeah, I think it's, listen, I think that it's, I know, it's okay. I think it's okay the way you asked the question. I'm glad you asked it.
It bothers me too.
I think it's not bothering. It's more like it's become such a buzz. It's one of those things that like, it's so ubiquitous. Did I pronounce that right?
Ubiquitous.
There
we go, yeah.
There's another thing that you'll learn about me in these tapes is that I read a lot, but for some reason I missed phonics. And like, I know what words are and what they mean. I have a very wide vocabulary.
It's very widespread.
That's what I mean. It's so ubiquitous that it's just used freely. And I think sometimes we don't sit and think about how precious stories are. To me, they're precious. To me, when someone shares a story with you, especially if it's a vulnerable story, or when you share a vulnerable story, like we should hold those things so dear. And I think when I see storytelling, this is especially, I see this a lot in marketing.
That's what that was going to be my next question.
There's different, when you say storytelling, obviously I have to it's something I've learned as a researcher, an academic, and someone who works in the business world as well. I have to qualify it. Like, this is why we always ask that question at the end of these interviews. That's why I put the question in there. How do you define storytelling?
Well, I'll ask you that in a second.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But everybody defines it differently. But I do think, like, I would just be aware, like, for anybody listening to this, think about how you define storytelling. And hold that. Hold yourself accountable and hold that. That should be precious to you. Because I think when we walk through the world, like, flippantly, like, there are two aspects to this of why it bothers me. One, if you flippantly are like, I'm a storyteller and I do this, or like, this is my story and blah, 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 blah. And I hear a lot of advice about, just like, go tell your story, be yourself, it'll be great. Not always. Sometimes you tell your story to the wrong person. Sometimes you're, especially in corporate.
There's a lot involved.
There's a lot of politics involved.
There's who you're telling it to, how you're telling it to them.
This is rhetoric.
How it's received.
Absolutely. And I think the most successful storytellers are the people that understand context, audience, trust. They understand that not everybody is deserving to hear that story. Right? Or who are the players? Who are the characters in your story? Are you sharing something that makes them vulnerable and maybe they don't want that stage?
Very true. Yeah, not everybody's at the same stage as you are.
Right, and I think that that is what I go back to, like, when I said it was precious. That's what most bothers me when it's used flippantly.
Yeah. So, okay, you had just said, I think you need to be responsible, right? Okay, so what
in storytelling? So what is let me think how I want to say this. Well, we think in terms of marketing a lot for storytelling, right? That's how we do it. Like, when you think, like, No, I do not.
Well, okay, maybe you don't, but I do.
I think as a journalist.
You do think as a journalist. I probably don't as much because I'm not a journalist like you are, right?
You were.
Well, not a trained journalist, but sure.
Okay. I'm just going to let that one slide to move on.
I mean,
you reported just as much as I did.
Okay, so the storytelling, and some people would say that storytelling. I think it has to be centered around people.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So I guess I said marketing is because people think of marketing and they think.
Oh yeah, so like if you have a spinning coffee cup on a TV, like that's not storytelling.
That type of thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're not telling us.
Stories have to be, in my mind, about people. And if you're talking about research, stories are, I'm kind of giving away my definition.
Yeah.
Stories are the vehicle that, I think of stories.
But you think about this more than most people, so I think it's
I've read the neuroscience.
We have a good understanding of what you think storytelling is.
I see it as like, you've got this person or people and this group of people and this person, and they have different perspectives, which we can go into how that's created. But then stories are just the vehicles that allow us to empathize. Mm-hmm. It's pretty simple. But to your point, it has to involve, why would I want to empathize with a brand?
That's a simple but not easy definition of storytelling.
If you're thinking from a corporate perspective, you're hoping that people empathize with your brand.
Yeah.
And that's not, I guess, aren't corporations people?
Yes.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's a good.
That answers that question.
We could talk a lot about that too, but
but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah,
but that still means like even though a corporation is this entity that's a brand,
legally,
we talk about brands.
Yeah.
That's still a persona that people are connecting to, and that's why storytelling works in that environment.
I never thought about it that way. That's good. Mm-hmm. So that's why you got your PhD.
Sure. Think about lots of these things.
What else are you thinking about lately?
I don't know, Kyle. I wake up really early in the morning and I just think, and sometimes Kyle's been married to me, so like I'm your only, as far as I know, your only husband, right? My only husband.
Okay,
13 years of me.
That's good.
So that my brain is like, Kyle.
Yeah.
And you're just like, most of the time I think you just block me out because I have said these things to you, but I think they just go phew.
Well, I mean, like, we won't have to talk. People don't care about it. You're way more verbal than I am.
That's true.
I am just not. I'm not a talker. You
are. Married one.
I married one. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. But I enjoyed this talk.
I do too, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Well, that's good.
That's the highlight of my week.
We have that in common after 13. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Okay, we had to pause the podcast to let you in on this opportunity. If you're ready to elevate your brand storytelling, don't miss our training, Tell Better Stories, led by me, a seasoned television journalist and PR professor, and Kyle, an on-air meteorologist and video storytelling expert. This workshop unveils our secrets to craft compelling, personal-driven narratives that resonate with your audience. Learn our distinct approach that puts people first and brands second, leveraging 6 storytelling elements for maximum impact. Walk away with actionable strategies, tactics, and a clear process to replicate success in any organization. Check out the show notes to learn more about this offer or reach out to homeplacecreative@gmail.com.
Okay, so we can try to wrap this up here, but we've learned that you think a lot about stories, right?
I do.
So you
if there is one driving, motivating for how they say what's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? That's it.
Not coffee?
I mean, obviously coffee,
okay.
but no, I mean, that's it. I get excited. You know this about me.
I do know this.
I get my energy and motivation when it literally comes from, I love hearing people's stories.
So do I.
And I love telling my stories.
Yep.
I love telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just, to me, is everything because life is about relationships. It's about connections. It's about, that's when you feel most alive.
Yep, I have said this too. I'm behind the camera a lot. And my favorite part of the job is when I'm interviewing somebody and they're telling me their story. It's the best.
And you know that it's their genuine story.
Exactly. It's not when I'm editing it. It's not when it's when you're right in the moment hearing about it. Mm-hmm. And you see them to start get a little teared
emotional,
up, or maybe some goosebumps, or maybe whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That like you said, that's when you know that you're onto something. There's a story here.
Right. And you know that's so, the reason why it is a buzzword, which we talked about, is because it is very powerful.
It is.
And really cool is neuroscience is starting to catch up with what we've kind of always, I think, intuitively known as human beings, that when somebody tells me a story, I feel connected to them. So you know why that happens to you? Do you know why you feel that probably? No. It's because your brain wave patterns sync with the storytellers.
Really? In between us that we can't see?
Your brain waves are syncing with those
so
storytellers.
Literally the same thing is happening in my brain as in your brain.
When you are...
We're not sharing brain waves.
No, when you are immersed. You have to be immersed in the story.
Yeah.
So a good example would be when you have someone is so there, they're with you, and you're setting the scene, and they're in, they feel like they've been in another world, right? They're in your world, they're in your perspective.
Yeah, okay.
So they have found, neuroscientists, this is recent, in the past 10, 15 years.
The proverbial, I can literally put myself in your shoes right now.
Yeah, but you can.
But you can.
Neuroscience is proving it. And then
it's not just like a surface level thing.
But you think about it, like as humans, we've always been that way. And I mean, how old is put yourself in somebody else's shoes? We've been doing that since we started the conversation talking about the ancients. We've been doing this since then, but it's really fascinating to me that like science is catching up.
Interesting. Okay, good stuff, Meg.
You know what?
Transitions are never my thing.
No, obviously.
I'm not gonna lie.
It's okay. It's okay, Kyle. Wrap us up.
Okay, all right. So, 3 questions for you.
Yeah, do you know what they are?
I do know what they are.
Because you've been buying the camera for all of them.
What?
Okay.
So, Meg, what is your favorite story?
This one's so easy. You know the answer. It's Anne of Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables.
I've seen it.
No, not the movie. The book.
Oh, okay.
The movie's pretty good though. The one that was made in the 80s.
There's
so many movies.
Have you ever heard anybody say the movie's better than the book?
Actually,
ever?
I have.
Has anyone ever said that?
Recently, because Kyle had This Summer I Turned Pretty apparently is a lot different. The Prime television show is a lot different than the book. And I would say also Daisy Jones and the Six gives the book a run for its money.
I haven't read
You haven't read the book, but I have.
I love the series. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it's like the series that makes it different.
Yeah, if you extend it out, you give it the time.
Yes.
That's probably true. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
But Anne of Green Gables,
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Because Anne was a redhead, as you know.
And so are you.
Yes. Proverbially, I feel like I was a redhead. When I was a child, I felt like I was just outcasted.
Okay.
Not because
So
I
you
had red
connected
hair.
with Anne.
I did. I saw so much of myself in Anne Shirley. And then I tell my kids now, our kids.
Yeah, I think, right? Earlier, it's like, I think this is my first husband. Like,
I didn't say it like that.
You implied it.
No, how did I imply
yes.
it? Let's roll the tape back.
Well, we can do that, yeah, sure. You're probably right.
I tell our kids. You say my kids all the time.
I do.
I tell our kids, one of the best quotes from Anne of Green Gables was from Miss Stacy. And she said, "Tomorrow's a new day with no mistakes in it."
You do say
and
that to
I
the
say that to
kids
all the time.
You,
And I lived by that.
You should say that to me more often.
I know. I love that adage. And Anne was like a character who was kind of always getting herself into like these situations, and she always had like the best intentions. And she was always like the smartest. And she's just a lovely character. And now that I'm an adult, I see why. I was like, that makes total sense why I would love this story. And I read all the stories because there's books that follow Anne, and then there's books about Anne's kids. So I devoured that content as a kid.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Good answer.
That's a good story.
Okay, so next question. What's your best advice? Either good or bad.
I know, I haven't thought about this.
This is your best, like, it's not marketing advice, right? It's like
it's storytelling.
Best storytelling advice.
Yeah.
Good or bad? I
can actually give you both.
Okay.
Like, I'll think about it. I'm going to go, this is so out of character. I'm going to go with the worst first. When I was on television, I think a lot of the pressure I felt came from management.
Sure.
And they wanted me to look a certain way as a woman. They wanted me to look a certain way. They wanted me to present things a certain way, and it wasn't aligned with who I am. In this interview and in all the speaking that I do, and I had this criticism. They said I sounded like a Valley girl.
Yeah. I
do. It's my tones. It's the way that I speak. Listen, I'm okay with it. I'm going to be 40 almost. Like, it's okay. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that I want to say to people about this bad piece of advice. Sort of like yours. But like, when someone tells you not to be yourself, like, I wasted years, not weeks, not hours, years. I was like this close to hiring a voice coach. And I would talk in front of a mirror with I tried so hard to have broadcaster to fix it.
Yeah, not to fix it.
To fix it. And then I think recently it's been cool because we started in TV a long time ago. Recently, you're seeing anchors wear their natural hair. The blazers are gone.
We did miss it.
But it's cool. Like, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so excited for these young journalists. And I'm like, why did we? That was so silly. But it was just the way the industry was, and that was one of
just little things, right?
It was one of the things that drew me out of many.
Oh gosh, well,
but that was a big one for me and now as an adult, like and it kind of carried. I mean, so I presented I should say, at academic conferences, and I don't look or talk like an academic. So
you're just this like unicorn, man.
Well, no, I'm not a unicorn, but I talk like like other women my age, right?
Yeah, but okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So I always, here's what I'm saying. I always thought that I had to chameleonize as a storyteller to fit like the audience, right? Like if I'm in an audience of academics, and it always was rooted in insecurity, right? Because like me talking like a Valley girl when I was 22 was my insecurity as a journalist, but I had no reason to have that insecurity. I knew what I was doing.
You did?
I know. And as an academic, my first time presenting at academic conferences, I looked around the room and I was like, I should talk like these people. I should dress like these people. And there's a cadence to the way that certain people speak and present. Sure. And so, yeah, for a while I did that. And I think, what broke it for me, the habit was being in front of a classroom day in and day out with students. And the more that I just was myself and explained things to them with the stories that I knew, they just built that confidence over time. And I was like, screw it. I'm just going to, I know it's also like having the confidence to say, I actually do know what I'm talking about and I care about it. And maybe I don't know everything. That's another thing. If somebody, the most terrifying thing that could ever happen at an academic conference would be someone to ask you a question, you wouldn't know the answer. But it's okay to be like, I don't know.
I'll check into it.
I don't know.
So your advice then is to not chameleonize? What's the advice?
The advice is to not, obviously you need to know your audience. Your messaging should match your audience, but the way that you perform doesn't have to. I think we live in an age where so for instance, if I'm going to a business conference, I don't necessarily have to wear like a super nice dress and heels. Like I could wear what I think it's be most comfortable. That's my advice. Be most comfortable in your story. If you talk the way you talk, that's the way you talk. And if people are going to judge you because of that, that's not your problem.
To me, that sounds like positive advice. That doesn't sound like a negative. That doesn't sound like the worst advice you ever got.
Well, the worst advice I got was to not be myself.
Okay, well there you go. That's good. Yeah.
We went full circle.
They didn't specifically say don't be who you are.
No, they said don't talk like that.
They said don't talk like that.
Don't talk like that.
Yeah.
They said cut your hair and dye it blonde. They said you need to wear a blazer. They said, and then when I got to academia, no, that was more subtle. That was more implicit. Like, because it's more free. Like, people can do it. Like, academia is academia.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, but the news was like the first taste of it, and then and maybe I put that on myself a little bit too.
No, I saw it happen to a lot of other women too in the news business. So I don't think it was just you.
No, but I mean, like in academia, I think like I just was like consciously aware of like how people were dressing and how they were presenting and how they carried themselves. And I guess what I'm saying is maybe it just comes with age, but like just carry yourself in a way that you feel confident and comfortable.
Right, yeah, definitely.
That would be my best advice. And I made that up because I think that's just what I've learned over time about speaking. Like, if you talk like you talk, then this goes back to storytelling, like, your stories are your stories. So, like, you're going to perform them and you're going to tell them as you. Yeah. As you.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't pretend to be somebody else. You can't mimic somebody else.
Okay, good. And finally, Meg, the third question is your, oh my gosh, it's slipping my mind.
How do you define storytelling?
How do you define storytelling? But we already kind of know that.
Yeah, I did.
But tell us in a nice condensed soundbite.
It's really easy. So storytelling is the vehicle to connect one human heart to another.
That's
how I define it.
That's it?
That's it.
Yeah, I feel like I need to ask you another quote now, or another question. What's your favorite quote?
That is my quote.
No. What's your favorite quote of all time?
Favorite quote? Ooh, I have so many.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would depend on the day.
Okay.
Honestly, today is probably like, just because it came to me, it was like, those who storytell rule society. Plato.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't ever take.
Oh my gosh, you have one.
I don't even. Who was that? Was that?
Isn't that Michael Jordan?
That was Michael Jordan, I think. Yeah. Or you miss.
You know what? Funny story. Yeah. So Kyle and I volunteer at a local high school, and I was walking through the hallway. Speaking of like always finding a story, I was walking through the hallways, and they had these motivational quotes everywhere, and that was like on the wall, and I just like I shook my head,
it's a good one, right?
I immediately thought of you. I was like, there he is.
It's a really good one.
Yeah, it was.
Michael Jordan knew what he was talking about,
Knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, knows what he's talking about. He's still around, of course. Right. Well, that was fun. What do you think?
That was really fun. Yeah, I think that went well. And you know what? If you guys you guys like this video, and you want to hear more from me, you can hit the subscribe.
You always just give out your personal cell phone number or something. People just call you and text.
No, it's like a link in bio.
Oh,
hit the subscribe button.
Click the link in bio. Oh, I don't know why that's funny to me.
No, it is funny to us. Okay, but no, seriously, I'll come back.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
but we should say, because this is probably going to come out as this will come out with the first batch of our podcast. So as Kyle and I are the hosts of the podcast, we will be back. So this is legit. Like, if there's something that you want to know or have questions about or want us to cover, like a topic about storytelling.
Oh,
like, pop it in the comments.
Yeah.
Pop it in the comments and we'll come back and do an episode on it.
That's a good idea. That's a really great idea to get people to engage with our stuff.
Oh my God.
You're onto something today. All right.
This is not between two ferns.
Well, that's
Kyle
how I feel
wants it
right
to be.
now.
That's how Kyle
I
wants
do secretly. This is great. That's so funny. Okay. Well,
turn this off.
high five. We're glad you've listened to this podcast episode. If you liked it, would you mind doing us a favor and sharing this episode with someone who would be interested in the topic too? We're on a mission to help everyone become a better storyteller. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and get updated every time we release a new episode too. Each and every episode is produced, hosted, and edited by us, Kyle and Meg Adams at Homeplace Creative. Happy storytelling.